to Edison Open House Global Healthcare 2022. In this session, we're going to focus on the Australian biotech company specialising in anti-infectives, Hexima. And with me is their CEO, Michael Aldridge. Michael, welcome.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. Now, tell us a bit about this company, because it specialises in particular molecules, doesn't it?
Correct. We have isolated a molecule. It's a peptide molecule, and we call it a defensin class of molecule, and it has particular properties as a very, very powerful antifungal agent. It serves that role. It's been evolved for that role in natural plants, but we've co-opted it as a potential therapy for the treatment of fungal infections in humans, where it's proving to be extraordinarily effective.
And the world is rather short of antifungals, isn't it?
Well, antifungals have been around for a long period of time, but there's two challenges there. A, there's not been an enormous amount of innovation in this space, and those therapies that are available don't have, they have some very clear shortcomings. They're older therapies. There's been very little innovation, and there's a concerning development of resistance to many of these older anti-infectives, and that really opens up an exciting market opportunity for us.
Now, the indication that you've chosen is onychomycosis, or what probably people know better as nail fungus, which is an extraordinarily prevalent problem. Tell us a bit more about it and why the current treatments for it are so inadequate.
Yes, so onychomycosis, as you say, is a very common nail infection. It occurs as a consequence of the fungus actually invading and penetrating under the nail and setting up an infection. It is a chronic, progressive condition that results in quite painful nail separation, drying of the nail, cracking of the nail separation from the nail bed, and it's extraordinarily difficult to treat. Many fungal infections of the skin can be resolved quite quickly and easily, but because of the fact that this fungal infection sits underneath the nail, it is very difficult to get antifungal agents to penetrate the nail and kill the fungal infection. So it's a very common condition. It's a very difficult condition to treat, and again, that sets up a very attractive market opportunity for us.
So you've got the current treatments are basically, very powerful drugs, and there's lots of issues with side effects and whether they're suitable for patients and interactions with other drugs. You have these topical ointments that require people to put them on daily or twice daily for 18 months. And who's going to do that? And then you've got all these kind of other things like lasers, which aren't really very successful. So this is a potentially a big market if you can go after it. As you say, 15% of the population. It's a very simple and cost-effective production platform that you've got. Can you describe your IP situation?
Certainly. We have now granted patents in all of the major pharmaceutical markets covering the use of pezadeftide in the treatment of onychomycosis. This includes the US, Japan, which is a very large market, all of Europe, and more recently China. And that patent life is quite comprehensive and extends out to 2035, plus any available patent term extensions. So we have a very well-established core patent position with a long life patent. But then also pezadeftide, it's a peptide, it's a biologic formally, and thus in the US and in many other major markets, we actually enjoy market exclusivity for 12 years following approval. And then, of course, we continue to prosecute and file new patents covering some of the more innovative stuff that we've done around pezadeftide, particularly in its formulation.
Unless people think it's just, it's fungus in your toenail, actually, a lot of issues arise for people who are immunocompromised. So although there are some people who have it very mildly, and quite a lot of people will be familiar with it, especially if they use the gym or swimming pool a lot. But actually, for those who are immunocompromised, it can lead to much more significant illness, can't it? So it is an issue that does need treatment.
It is. It's an issue that certainly needs treatment. It's an infectious disease. it's a chronic progressive disease. If you don't treat it, it will progress and you actually become a reservoir of infection. You can start with a fungal nail infection and end up with other fungal infections in your skin. You can pass it on to your partner. As you say, you can pass it on through the gym. This was a disease that was relatively uncommon 100 years ago, but it's got very common as a consequence of modern lifestyle. And so it is a condition that you really should talk to your doctor about getting treated.
And obviously with 15% or so of the US population estimated to be affected by nail fungus, it's a big market. But what are your commercialization plans? Are you looking for partnerships or licensing agreements? Where are you going on this?
Yeah, so look, you're quite right. It's a very large market opportunity. It's the most common nail disorder that clinicians see, and they're very frustrated by this lack of good treatment options. It is a market that's challenged drug developers in the past. They've been unable to deliver a product which really addresses what this very consumer-driven market is looking for. But we think we've got something that's very different here. Pezadeftide penetrates the nail very effectively, and then once it's across the nail and into the nail bed, it delivers this very powerful fungicidal payload. And we've seen some very impressive clearance rates in our early studies, and importantly, patients start to see benefits very quickly, and that has started to generate very strong interest among investors. But our commercialization strategy, which really gets to your question, is very clear. Our goal is to develop pezadeftide independently in the US. That's our primary market, but also Europe. Whereas Japan is quite different. Japan is it's a very large market for topical treatments for onychomycosis, and it is quite insular, requiring certain development activities to be conducted specifically for the Japanese market. So accordingly, in Japan, our strategy is to license our technology to a leading pharmaceutical company to interact directly with the local PMDA and develop and commercialize pezadeftide in that territory. And of course, the other benefit of a license into Japan is that it's a territory where we've got no particular expertise. It requires a local partner that is likely to deliver a significant quantum of non-dilutive capital to assist us in financing our phase 3 program.
Meanwhile, I'm guessing you're also considering other potential indications for such a powerful antifungal.
We are. Pezadeftide has this very broad spectrum fungicidal activity, which fortunately is very specific to fungal cells. So it's a very powerful antifungal, but it doesn't hit anything else. And it is effective as an application to localize fungal infections. But as I said, there is this long history of older antifungal pharmaceutical products which have a variety of shortcomings. And there's been very little innovation in this space. And so there is this evidence that these older anti-infectives are starting to see the emergence of drug resistance and thus losing some of their activity. And so, we're quite well advanced in a comprehensive research program, really to understand pezadeftide's potential broader clinical application. And we do expect to announce a second pipeline product sometime in the new year.
And how many years do you think you have before pezadeftide 2 becomes resistant?
The mechanism of action of pezadeftide is completely novel. And pezadeftide is the first in a new class of antifungal agents. And its mechanism is quite multifactorial. And so as a consequence of that, the potential of fungal infections to work by a mechanism which develops resistance to pezadeftide is fundamentally much lower than an antifungal agent with a very specific single targeted mode of action. So we don't see it happening at all. But of course, there is always an interest in new research into these very challenging to treat diseases. We just think we've got something very powerful, something very new, without potential for the development of resistance.
So finally, and very briefly, can you share with investors what your development milestones are in 2022 that they should be looking out for?
Yes, 2022 is going to be a very exciting and quite pivotal year for Hexima. The critical announcement we're looking forward to is in the second quarter of 22, we expect to announce the results of our phase 2b clinical trial. We've reported extraordinary results from our earlier clinical trials to date, but it is this 117 patient trial, which is evaluating 3 different treatment regimens and a follow-up period of 9 months, which will really define the potential of pezadeftide in fungal nail infections. So early in 2022, we'll conduct a small safety study in the US, and our plan is then to take our data from our phase 2b clinical trial to FDA in the third quarter of 2022 at an end of phase 2 meeting and discuss phase 3 plans. So our key milestones in 2022 comprise the delivery of that data in the second quarter, a corporate partnership in Japan, capital raising to finance our phase 3 clinical trial program, and then finally initiation of that phase 3 study at the end of 2022. It's going to be as I said, a very busy and very exciting year.
Thank you so much for being with us. That's Michael Aldridge, CEO of Hexima.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.